Hello, everyone, and welcome. This is Chrissy, career coach and corporate trainer and founder of eatyourcareer.com, helping you create a nourishing professional life. Welcome to today's live Q&A session, which we're also calling Ask the Career Coach. So this is your opportunity to submit questions about your career challenges, and I will take some time to answer those questions for you as best I can. So I'm going to pause here for a minute as people enter the webinar room, and I just want to make sure that you can all hear me and see me. So if you would do me a favor and just type the word yes into the chat box, if you can see me and hear me, that would be really helpful. That way I know I'm not just talking to myself. You know, sometimes I do that, but I'm not intending to do that today. I did not take the time last month to do this kind of check. And as we all know, that became an issue. I ended up talking to myself for a little while before I realized you couldn't see me or hear me. So go ahead and just type that word yes into the chat box for me. In the meantime, it looks like we do have people who are joining us I see someone from Maryland. You can also let us know where you are. It's kind of interesting to see people from all over the country and sometimes all over the world who can join these sessions. We've got somebody from Atlanta. Let's see here. So it looks like a couple of people are having trouble with the screen getting frozen. If that ever happens, just make sure that you just hit refresh on your browser, and that way it'll usually trigger and come back on. We've got somebody from Southern California who's joining us. I don't see anybody saying yes yet, that you can see me and hear me. So be sure that you type that into the chat menu. That way I know that we are good to go. Let's see here. Oh, good. We've got one person who says yes. Excellent. Okay, now you're all saying yes. Thank you. Okay, fantastic. Okay, well, thank you, Wendy and Keisha and Cindy and Mary and Christina and Catherine and Carl, fantastic, and Sean, Latasha and Jennifer. I'm so glad that all of you are here. This is great. Okay, I think that we have a majority here of people who can see me and hear me. So let's get started. I have about 8 questions that were submitted through the online form. So I want to make sure that I get to those first. But if you have a question, make sure that you type it into the chat menu, because I want to reward you for being here on the live session, and I'll make sure that I address your question as well. Okay, so let's jump into this. I've got some good ones today. All right, the first question says, I was recently informed that my job will be terminated in about 3 months. Until then, I'm still working, but I'm finding it hard to stay motivated and positive. Great question here. And of course, it makes sense that you would have a difficult time staying motivated and positive when you know that your job is ending in 3 months. So I want to talk about this really quickly, because some of you might not be familiar with this concept. If you've never experienced it before, it might sound really, really strange that a company would say, hey, your job's going to be gone in 3 months. Why would they do that? Couple of different reasons. Number one is that there are some legalities around this. If an organization is going to lay off a certain percentage of their workforce, then they have to issue a public notice, and they also have to give notice to their employees, and they usually need to give between 60 and 90 days, I think. Don't quote me on any of the legalities, but there are some regulations that they have to follow if they're laying off a certain percentage of the workforce. So that could be one situation where this sort of thing might happen. Or the position itself might just not be necessary in a certain period of time, and the organization is doing you a kindness by giving you that early warning. That way you can go ahead and prepare for that and do whatever you can to kind of wrap up the role, and then exit whenever that time comes. So it would make sense if you do struggle with motivation and attitude during that period of time. But I really want to caution you to be very careful during this period of time, because you want to make sure that you're leaving with your relationships and your reputation intact. So what that means is that you want to take this opportunity to really do whatever you can for the organization. Make sure that you find out exactly what needs to be done before the role is wrapped up, and try to complete that to the best of your ability. At the same time, because you have this early warning, you want to take advantage of that for your job search. So you might want to speak with your manager and just ask, is it okay to do some job search on company time? And find out about getting some time off for interviews if needed. Most organizations are very flexible when they have this sort of situation. They really want to make it easy for you to be able to find your next engagement. You also want to connect with people who are staying in the organization. So usually what happens is that the people who are remaining with the organization want to do everything that they can to help you out, because they understand that this is an unusual situation. You've got this early notification. They know that you're job searching. So take advantage of that and speak with them. Let them know what opportunities you're looking for, what organizations you're interested in, and see if they can help facilitate any introductions or give you some referrals or recommendations. So use this time to your advantage. I understand how uncomfortable it can be. For those of you who have never been in an experience like this, sometimes you will be asked to even, train your replacement if your position's being outsourced, for example, and that can just be very awkward. So do your best to try to remain professional, because how you handle yourself during this period of time is going to speak volumes about you. People will remember how you act during this period. And you want to show that you are poised and you remain graceful and gracious throughout this notification period. So best of luck to you. Great question. All right, I'm pausing for a minute just to see what's going on in chat. Good. So we've got a lot of you in here today. And remember that you can share your experiences with these sorts of situations as well. If you've ever been through a layoff, if you've ever had an early notification of a layoff, feel free to share your experiences in the chat menu. That's what it's there for. Okay, next question here. I like this question because it's not really a question. Well, it is a question, but it's phrased very simply. It just says, what to do when I don't like my job? What to do when I don't like my job? So the easy answer to this question is get another job. But there are so many considerations to think about before you do that. I do not like to just tell people willy-nilly to just go get another job when you don't like the one that you're in. The reason being that can really start a very vicious cycle of job hopping if you don't go in with a strategy. So if you're not happy where you are currently, I really encourage you to do some soul searching and figure out what it is that you don't like about this position that you're currently in. Is it the people? Is it the actual job tasks that you're doing? Or is it the organization and the culture and maybe the mission of the organization? There's a lot of different pieces that can contribute to unhappiness in the workplace. And I want you to figure out what those things are so you can avoid them in the future. I have a great resource in the free career resource library. It's the workbook called How Nourishing is Your Career? And it walks you through step by step evaluating what's going on right now, so you can figure out what those pieces are that aren't working, and you can figure out what that next step should look like. So that's the first thing to do. In the meantime, while you're considering this and you're planning your strategy for next steps, I also want you to look at what's currently going on in the workplace and how you can possibly improve the situation where you are right now. Sometimes it's as simple as just outlining, okay, what aspects of the position do I actually enjoy and how can I do more of that? Sometimes it's about, finding a great friend in the workplace and having some camaraderie that can make a huge difference in your enjoyment. So try to find a few little things that you can do now to make the experience that you're currently in a little bit better until you can get to your next step. Thanks for asking that question. Okay. Let's see here. Next question says, I'm a stay-at-home mom returning to the workforce, planning to return after a hiatus. I'm facing challenges and dilemmas. So yeah, I mean, when you've been out of the workforce for a little while, you're trying to get back into it, it can be hard to get that ball rolling again. So a few recommendations for you. Make sure that you do what I call reignite your network. So get out there and reach out to your professional contacts. Let them know that you are looking to get back into the workforce. Schedule some coffee dates, go to lunch with some people, and just start reconnecting with the professionals in your network. Make sure that you're on LinkedIn and you've got your professional profile sort of established online, and start putting together your resume. So if you've been out of the workforce for a while, you probably don't have an up-to-date resume. Make sure that you do some research on the current trends. A lot of it is around accomplishments. So you'll need to call back on your previous employment experience and talk about your accomplishments there. You can certainly talk about why you were out of the workforce. Going and raising a family is certainly a valid reason, and it's very common. So you can talk about that in your cover letter. The one thing I recommend to stay away from is the really cutesy concept that some people use where they say that they held the position of CEO of household for 7 years. Things like that. I think that's a little too cutesy for most organizations. They really want to see your legitimate employment experience. They understand that you were away from the workplace for family obligations, and they do understand that there were things that you were doing in that period of time. You want to talk about those things in the interview, but they probably don't have a place on the traditional resume. You might want to consider using a functional resume, which is more about skill sets versus chronological employment experience. So consider looking at functional resumes and samples of those online. All right, I'm going to just check in here with chat. You guys are going wild in there. That's great. Okay, good. I'm so glad that you guys are chatting and sharing your experiences in there. I do see a couple of questions. Make sure that you mark your question as a question. That way it appears with a red question mark for me, so I see it. And I'll make sure that I get to those after we get to the pre-submitted questions. All right. Our next question says, when looking for a new job, what red flags or signs do I need to pay attention to find the right opportunities? Ooh, I love this question. Red flags in an interview. So yes, in the interview process, you definitely want to be doing your due diligence to look for things that might be indicators that this is not a great position for you. So first and foremost, you need to know what a great position for you looks like. So you know exactly what key traits you want and which key traits you don't want in your future employment. So that's number one. When you go into the interview, you can be very observational. Observe the environment, observe the people. Do your research around the culture of the organization. See if it matches what you're looking for. A great resource is Glassdoor.com. So Glassdoor, for those of you who are not familiar with it, it's a website where you can anonymously go on and you can talk about your experience in an organization. So former employees and current employees will tell you in totally honest terms what the organization is like. Keep in mind that most people who are inclined to go online and write a review about something are generally more disgruntled. You don't tend to see as many people with really positive impressions going on and taking the time to do a review. But sometimes it can just give you some indicators of some things that you might want to be cautious about. You can also ask direct questions in the interview as well. So a question that I really like is to ask your interviewer, what do you like best about working here and what do you like least? So when you put them in that position where they need to tell you, a really good trait of the organization as well as one that's really not so great, you can usually get some good feedback and some good conversation that way. So you can gauge how well it meets what you're looking for. So again, you've got to know what it is that you want out of this. When you go to an interview, you're interviewing the organization as much as they're interviewing you. You want to make sure that it's the right fit. So I really appreciate this question that was asked. Thank you. Okay, next question. This person says, I have a degree in accounting and an MBA. The past few years I've been self-employed. Prior to that, I job hopped quite a bit as I tend to get bored. I wonder if anyone else is familiar with that, getting bored and then you job hop. This person says, I don't think accounting is what I should be doing. I have one client for which I do customer service from home and I absolutely love it, but it's only 10 hours per week, so I can't live on that. I'd like to get away from accounting completely, but I'm not sure how to find something that I can be passionate about and work from home. I like being of assistance to people. My one accounting client is running out of money, so time is of the essence. The thought of getting an 8-to-5 job in an office almost makes me sick. Any ideas, thoughts, or suggestions? So it's a great question. And the question of being self-employed, I think a lot of people see it as an all or nothing thing. Either you're totally self-employed or you have the 8-to-5 job in the office that almost makes you sick. So I encourage you to think about the gray area in between those two things, because sometimes you can find a great part-time position that can help supplement a self-employment income. So this person says that they are currently working with one client where they're doing customer service for them and really loving it. So I encourage you to find other clients where you can do that same work that you're really loving. So sometimes when it comes to self-employment, the umbrella for that, being self-employed, working from home, they call that virtual assistants. So being a virtual assistant, you can offer a variety of different services, including customer service, which you're interested in. And you can do that from home. So perhaps what you need to look into is maybe rebranding your business into more of a virtual assistance business. But also I would recommend looking into the possibility of doing some part-time work where you can help supplement that self-employment income until you get enough clients to really support yourself full-time. I hope that was helpful. All right, we're knocking them out here. Next question says, how do I convey that I'm seeking a lower responsibility job when I've worked higher responsibility roles? I know I'm overqualified, but I don't want those roles anymore. Wonderful question. And it's a really common situation. I know that most people, when you're in this situation, you feel like no one will understand that I want to take a step back in my career. But it happens. It's common. And a lot of employers are very used to seeing this. So they won't be completely taken off guard when they see that you've held higher responsibility roles and yet you're applying for a role of lower responsibility. They will, however, have some questions that you'll need to be prepared to answer. So the first thing that you want to make sure that you have is a compelling reason why. So why do you want to take a step back in your career and have a lower level of responsibility? So some great reasons that I've heard in the past. I'm sick of traveling. I don't want to be on the road anymore. It's too tiring. And I want to have a position where I just have my, 8-to-5, like the previous person did not want. A lot of people really want that. They want that stability of just the simple, give me the 9-to-5 role. in the office. I want less travel. I want less stress. I have a lot of family obligations, and I just want to have a more stable schedule. There's a lot of different reasons why it would make sense to take a step back, but you need to make sure that you can explain your reasons in a very compelling way. You also need to address their common concern, and that's the concern of, oh, you're so overqualified for this role, you're going to get bored, and then you're going to end up leaving for another position that you'll be able to use all your skills and you'll get paid more. So you need to assure them that that's not what's going to happen. So make sure that you're talking about your long-term desire for this new employment position, and really emphasize the fact that this is something you've thought about consciously. This is a very deliberate choice that you're making. And again, go back to those compelling reasons that you've come up with. So good luck to you. And I think this is something that is more common than people realize. And I hope it really works out for you and you get exactly what you're looking for. All right, next question here. This person says, Chrissy, what's your suggestion on identifying meaningful work that an assistant can perform for their manager? What steps should one take? This is a question I posed to my director. However, we were not successful in identifying outcomes. I believe he may have been concerned about me stepping outside my defined role. I was thinking if I knew what to look for, it would help him identify as well. Great question. So this is an administrative assistant of some variety who wants to do more meaningful work for the person that he or she supports. So the number one thing I would say here is it's a great goal that you have. Very worthy goal. I'm so happy that this is something you want to do. I always caution people, though, against going directly to the manager and just opening up this kind of conversation. Instead, you want to do more work on your end where you're very clear on exactly what that meaningful work looks like, and you're taking the recommendation to the manager. Your chances of read and have that pushback that you got of, I don't want you going outside your role. I really need you doing this over here. So I'm glad that you're doing the thought process now and you're thinking about what you want to contribute in a more meaningful way. So the number one thing I think that assistants can do that doesn't take them too far out of their existing capacity is problem solving and process improvement. So looking at what you currently do and finding ways to make it more efficient and more effective. There is a great resource through the website called All Things Admin, run by Julie Perrine, a great friend of mine. She does a lot of work around creating administrative procedures. I highly recommend her work on this topic. It's a great starting place as an administrative professional to develop a very comprehensive procedures manual for everything that you do on a regular basis. When you do that, you will start to see areas where you can make things more efficient, where you can make things more effective. You'll start to find, oh, we're duplicating steps over here, or maybe we can consolidate these 3 reports together and make this process a little bit faster. It'll be a great way for you to start thinking about what those improvements might look like. So that's probably the easiest one to tackle right away. Secondly, the other area where I think it's largely under talked about and undervalued from the outside is the fact that assistants can provide more meaningful support to their executives by anticipating needs. So really, it's about honing your craft of being a support professional and learning how to think 2 steps ahead of your manager or your executive. So that is something that takes time and it takes practice. And that is probably something that your executive would love for you to really focus on developing that skill. for him or her. So I'm going to do a quick plug for my book, The Proactive Professional. It's what it's all about, is anticipating needs. And there's some strategies in there for you to practice. You can also just work with your executive directly and let them know, I really want to get to a place where I understand what you need before you need it. And we need to have more regular communication and conversation. I need to understand how you think, and we need to really be in sync with your priorities and your goals. So you're starting to work with them as more of a strategic partner than just an assistant. So I hope that gives you some things to think about. Those are the most meaningful items that I recommend for assistants. I know I have a ton of administrative professionals in the Eat Your Career community. So I hope there's some chat going on over there of what other people are saying about meaningful work and meaningful contributions as an assistant. Thanks for the question. All right, this is the last one that's been submitted through the online form. So I'm going to get to the chat questions right after this one. This person says, I am a retired military spouse and a veteran too. Thank you for your service. How can I include soft skills gained and enhanced in my resume? We've moved 7 times, lived and traveled internationally, and we volunteered for families, especially during crisis. So that sounds like there's some great relevant experiences to share. So how do you include those on your resume? I think that, if you're a veteran, obviously your military service is something you should include on your resume, and you can make sure that those types of items are included in there. If they don't specifically relate to your service, and it's more being a military spouse where you gained these sorts of skills, you can add them at the bottom of your resume under other relevant experience. Make sure that anything you put in there, though, is relevant. So the skills that you're demonstrating through these experiences, living and traveling internationally, what skills do you want to be demonstrating with that, and how do they relate to the position that you're applying for? Make sure that you can make that connection so you can talk about that in the interview. And you can also talk about these things in your cover letter. This is the stuff that makes you an interesting person. And a lot of employers are looking at personality fit. They want to make sure that you're a fit for the team and a fit for the organizational culture. And these sorts of conversation points are really important during interviews. So in your cover letter, you can speak a little bit about these things. And it just gives a little bit of, color to who you are as a person. And they're great conversation points for the interview as well. So I hope that's helpful. I'm going to pause. I'm going to jump over and take a look in chat and see what sort of questions we have there, because I do see quite a few. Okay, let's see here. All right, I'm going to try to take these in the order that they were submitted. So here's a great one. How can I stay motivated when I only have 3 years left until my retirement? It's kind of similar to the first question that I talked about with the person who had early notification that they were going to be laid off. You kind of have early notification that you're going to be voluntarily laid off in 3 years. So yes, you do need to stay motivated during that period. And I would recommend that you keep in mind the same things that I told our other questioner. You really do want to leave with your relationships and your reputation intact. So you've got to continue for the next 3 years, still contributing at a high level. Making sure that you understand what the goals of your position are, making sure that you're still bringing the best that you have with you, even though you've probably got that short timer syndrome. I know my parents used to say that when I was in college and in high school, right before graduation, it's like short timers. I'm not really focused anymore. But we've got to still focus. You still have a job to do for the next 3 years, and you want to make sure that you're still delivering, and use these next 3 years to really create your plan for retirement. I can't stress this enough. I've shared this story before on my website that my father, who was a pilot, pilots are forced into early retirement at the age of 60. They can't fly anymore. And flying was a big identity for him, as it is for most pilots. And at retirement, it was very difficult for him to transition into a new way of life. So please make sure that you know what you're going to do with your time. Make sure that you have some very clear goals for retirement. You've got hobbies in place. You've got things that you're going to be contributing to, volunteer work, friends and a social life and all that good stuff. Make sure you know what you're doing after retirement. So use these 3 years to your benefit, and good luck. Congratulations. Can't wait till I'm only 3 years away from that. I don't know that I'll ever retire. I love what I do so much, but we'll see. That might change. All right, let's see. Next question says, what should you do if you're doing more analytical, technical work in the senior executive assistant role and would like to be considered for promotion to an analyst role? Excellent. So if you're doing more analytical and technical work already, I want you to make sure that you're capturing your accomplishments. So back to the point I made earlier, resumes are accomplishment focused. You need to make sure that you can really identify all of this analytical and technical work that you've done. You want to be able to demonstrate that you have those skills, and here's the proof. So capture those accomplishments. Put together a resume that is very targeted toward that new analyst role. The great thing about the administrative profession is that it's a great stepping stone for those who want to use it that way. It can be a great stepping stone into other professions. So make sure that you are just able to cite what those accomplishments are and frame yourself as being someone who's very well trained in this area. You haven't held that title before, but that doesn't mean you don't have those skills and those accomplishments behind you. And a lot of organizations will recognize that administrative roles have that ability to do other functions, and they'll be open to looking at someone who previously was an executive assistant, but you've done all this analytical and technical work. So they'll be open-minded about that, most organizations. It might be easiest, though, to transition into that role in your current organization. So give that a shot as well. Hope that's helpful. Thanks for the question. All right, the next question says, how do you know what options you have to advance into as an EA or analyst position? I don't know what my options are that I can advance up to next. So this is interesting. These are two different people talking about, going from an EA to an analyst position. I hope you two are connecting in chat. So how do you know what options you have to advance either as an EA or into an analyst position? So how you know what your options are within your current organization, you need to open up a conversation with your superiors and find out what those career paths might look like in your current organization. Within, external organizations, you can always tap your network. You can go to professional association meetings and groups and find out what other people's career paths have looked like. Research online, it's a great way to learn more about what people's career paths have looked like. I always like Googling, just Google day in the life of an analyst, day in the life of an executive assistant. And people will talk about their career paths and experiences and how they've gotten where they are and what they do on a daily basis. So there's some interesting resources that are just available online. If you really end up stuck and you don't know what your career path might look like, you can always work with a career coach. You can always grab, I've got the Build Your Professional Development Plan. It's got some exercises and some research strategies for how you can go about figuring out what you want your career path to look like and then finding where that might be available out there in the marketplace. So I hope that's helpful. All right, the next question says, if you were one of the survivors of a layoff and it's your team that was hit hard, is there a way to appropriately request additional compensation since you or one of your coworkers will have a greater workload because your team was cut in half? Instead of salary-wise, what else can you ask for? Really great question, and a very common one because it happens. When there's a big layoff, obviously there's been some sort of financial situation that has probably transpired that's made this layoff necessary. So all these people have been laid off. You now have all this extra work, and you know that finances are probably tight. So it's difficult to go in and ask for more compensation. However, it can be appropriate. So I would make sure that you are as knowledgeable as you can be about the causes of the layoff. Was the layoff because of financial constraints? If so, you've got to think, if they've laid off 10 people, that's 10 salaries gone. You're not asking for 10 salaries. You're probably asking for a small percentage of one person's salary. So sometimes that can make sense for an organization to keep you happy, to keep you working hard and covering those 10 people's work. But make sure that you understand as much as you can about the situation before you go in. It can, make better sense to wait a little while. Appropriate period of time can be anywhere from 6 months to a year. Make sure you're capturing all of your accomplishments and everything that you've been doing to cover for all of those people who were laid off so that you can cite the specific evidence and proof for why you deserve that increased compensation. And make sure that you're going in and you're asking specifically for the raise that you want. So that would be my recommendation for you. You've got to gauge it based on what you know of the situation. If it's appropriate to ask right now, or if you might want to wait, 6 months. And then it absolutely makes sense for you to ask for that increased compensation because you are doing a much greater load of work. I definitely understand that, and I've seen it before. So to repeat the website that was mentioned, Julia asked this question, glassdoor.com, door, D-O-O-R. Great. Somebody else said that in chat. Perfect. Okay. I love it when I see links in here and you guys are sharing resources. That's so cool. Thank you. Okay. Next question. Are the certifications for an AA through IAAP or PACE worth getting and recognizable by organizations? So for an administrative professional, the IAAP has the CAP certification, Certified Administrative Professional, and then ASAP, the American Society for Administrative Professionals, has PACE certification. Full disclosure, I played a role in creating the PACE certification. I wrote 2 modules in there. I'm really proud of that certification. I love it. So, I'm biased when I say, yes, I think it's absolutely worth it. Do organizations recognize it? That's the real question here. The CAP certification by IAAP is typically it's more well recognized because it's been around longer. PACE just started last year, so it's not as well known. It will be. It will be as well known, I guarantee it. It is a very modern certification. So, I think that I'm going to say the same thing I always say about certifications. It's all about what you do with the skills you gain. Are you able to demonstrate that because you're PACE certified, you were then able to deliver this higher level of experience for your executive? And if so, how do you demonstrate that through your accomplishments? That's what organizations really want to see. The certification in and of itself might not be something that they specifically care about, but if you're able to show a higher level of service because of what you've gained through that certification, that's what really matters. So I'm a huge, huge advocate of more training, more education, be a lifelong learner. And I say, take advantage of these things, especially now. It's really quite easy to do a lot of it online. The PACE certification, we do live sessions at the APC conference. We're doing them in September. You take the exam while you're there. It's really cool. It's a great experience, and there's a lot to be learned in that program. So I highly recommend it. Okay. This question, Donna, I might have you rephrase it if there's something specific with this. So she says, CEA, Chief Executive Assistant. Have you heard of this new higher experienced position? Chief Executive Assistant is a common title. If you are supporting the CEO, being Chief Executive Assistant is an appropriate title for you. If you're supporting, the president of an organization, something like that, it's a higher level support title because you're supporting a C-level executive. So you are a C-level executive assistant. And yes, I've heard of that quite a lot. Next question. If an executive assistant wants to continue a career in the academia as a lecturer or educator, what steps does he or she need to follow? This is a great question, and academia is a different kind of ball of wax. I definitely am more of a corporate focused coach. So when it comes to academics, there are some different restrictions. A lot of what I see, at least here in the Denver area, is that they require a master's degree level of education. So if you are interested in doing education at even, a community college, a lot of times they're still requiring a master's level education. And if you have that, there's an application process. I always recommend that you try to network in. People tend to have much better luck getting a foot in the door when they have a warm introduction from someone in their network. Different states, different cities and counties have different restrictions and limitations on what they're looking for from their educators, as well as different schools. A public community college is going to have different restrictions from a private college. So some of the private vocational schools will probably have some different limitations. They might not require that master's degree. So you'll just want to check in with them and see what that looks like for them. What do they want to see in terms of qualifications? And then do everything that you can to kind of set yourself up for success by meeting those qualifications. I'm always an advocate of really establishing yourself as a credible authority in your field. Best way to do that is through publications. So if you can write some articles, if you're an executive assistant, you want to lecture in that area, Executive Secretary Magazine is the top-notch publication for our field. So I would recommend that you get in touch with Lucy Brazier of Executive Secretary Magazine and try to do some articles so that you can show that you are published in this particular field. Those are just a couple of things kind of off the top of my head that might be helpful for that. Elizabeth asks if you can take the PACE certification if it's not at the conference. Yes, you can. You just need to go onto the ASAP website and learn more about what that process looks like for doing it through the online program. If you're logged in to the Eat Your Career Resource Library, I do have a page on there of admin resources. If you go to the library and you go to other goodies, I think is where it is, there's an admin resource list. And I have the direct link to the PACE certification page so you can learn more about it. Oh, good. Somebody just typed it in there. You guys are so on top of it. Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Sigrid. Okay. I'm just going to pause here. So I'm not seeing any more specific questions, things that are marked as questions, but some might not be marked as questions. So I'm going to just go through this. I'm also going to see what kind of comments we have going on in here too, because there's a lot of good interaction. So there's a couple of questions in here about interviewing. Let's see here. I love this question that says, can you give an example of an accomplishment an assistant can have when you assist others? So yes, I do resumes for executive assistants all the time. And it's like the hardest thing for an assistant, for some reason, to really recognize all of their accomplishments. But you have so many. Some of the accomplishments might center around process improvement types of things. So if, for example, you set up a new filing system and you're able to say, created a new filing system that improved retrieval time by 50%. Used to take us 4 hours to find a file. Now it only takes us 2 hours. So you can talk about process improvements like that. You could talk about things like scheduling really complicated travel itineraries that when we talk about results of that, that are minimizing wasted time on the road, that are easing the travel experience for the executive. Anytime that we're talking about accomplishments, you're always talking about what you did and what the result of it was. So assistants have just as many as any other profession. Take anything that you do on a regular basis and just think about what you've done and what the result of that has been. So hopefully that's helpful to give you a couple examples there. So I'm just looking back over at comments and other questions not marked as questions. This is a good one, and I'm going to go ahead and address it, even though it might be a little bit facetious. It says, why do you have to give explanations if somebody doesn't want to work long hours? So if somebody doesn't want to work long hours, and you have to give like an explanation for that, I suppose if the hours are being, required by the organization, sometimes during certain periods of time, overtime will be required for some roles. And if you're going to decline that, it might feel like you have to give an explanation. You might not technically have to, but in terms of, keeping a good relationship, maybe with your manager, with your coworkers, providing some, recognition of, I realize that overtime right now is something that everyone's being encouraged to do. I have some family obligations that I need to make sure that I can attend to. So make sure you give them what you can do, right? You're telling them, I can't do this. I got some family obligations, nice and generic. But what I can do is I can do a couple of hours of overtime, maybe once every other week. Give them something that you can tell them you can do. You never want to just decline something, outright saying no. Always say, here's something else I can do instead, and start a negotiation process. Hopefully that's helpful. Okay, we've got another question here. Let's see. How an EA could have a friendly relationship with his or her manager? So as an assistant, having a friendly relationship with your manager, it can certainly be helpful. Instead of calling it friendly, because it's not a friend relationship, we've got to be really clear about the difference between professional relationships and friend relationships. You don't want a friend relationship with the person that you support. That's not helpful. That can start to blur the lines. I've been in a relationship like that before, and it became very complicated because friends are different from managers. So we want to keep the executive in the position that they are in, which is, they are the boss. But having a friendly, fun, a good rapport relationship is definitely, it's a worthy goal. And I always say, try to just build rapport by finding some, some basic kind of common personal things that you share. Sometimes it's as simple as we both like the same baseball team, or, on the weekends, we both like to go hiking. So we talk about where we like to go hiking. We both have dogs, so we share pictures of our dogs. Little things like that can just help the relationship have more of a friendly tone. You don't want to get into a pattern, though, where you're going out and you're having cocktails with your boss after work. It's not helpful. It's not appropriate. Your executive shouldn't be engaging in it. But those kinds of friendly chit chat types of things, find those things. Don't make them the emphasis of conversations though, because you have to remember that your executive is busy. They care about having some rapport with you too. It's helpful for them as well. But you've got to make sure that you're keeping it in appropriate time limits there. Next question, is there a tactful way to decline Facebook requests from a boss or upper management? Yeah, I think, I'm not a huge Facebook user, as some of you probably know. If you're connected with me on there, I'm not on there often. But it's kind of the same thing on any social network. If you're not comfortable engaging with someone there's a couple of different options. I know on Facebook, you have all sorts of limits that you can set with people. So you could connect with them, but you could make it so that really nothing is visible to them. Like they can't see your status updates, or they can only see status updates that you post specifically for your work colleagues group, or something like that. Or, I personally think it's perfectly acceptable to simply, ignore, or, you can, I know on some social media sites, if you say, ignore or decline, they don't have notification of that. So it's perfectly fine. And a lot of people don't remember that they asked to connect with you. They don't notice that you didn't accept their invitation. So I don't think it's a huge social snafu that people kind of worry that it could be. And I feel for you. I personally would not want to connect with a superior, a current superior on social media sites. It's like blurring those lines of, friendship versus professional relationship. So hopefully that's a helpful perspective for you. The question about sending the recording of this session to attendees, absolutely. There is an automatic notification that goes out after these live sessions. It goes out about 3 hours after the live session, and it'll have a link to the replay. I also post the replay in the Career Resources Library. So if you have not attended one of these sessions before and you haven't seen the video replays before, go into the library from the main page, just click on, I think it's video, either click on videos or click on the Q&A sessions, and it'll take you to a list and you'll have all the video replays available. So the library is fairly user-friendly. It could probably be more user-friendly, but if you click into the different categories, you're going to find what you're looking for. And I hope you'll take some time to watch some of the old sessions too. There's so much good stuff that I've covered over the years, from the old coaching calls, the audio only sessions, and then these video sessions we've been doing now. There's so much good stuff in there. Take a little bit of time and just see what you can learn. Next question, any suggestions for higher education executive whom has no response in job search? So higher education, generally is referring to university coursework. And so again, I'm a huge fan of education. When you're talking about university coursework, tends to be more expensive, tends to have application processes that take some time. So if you are at the executive level and you're looking for a higher degree of education, it might be useful for you to go to your professional association and see what certifications are available. Sometimes they'll have continuing education programs and products that are more cost effective than university coursework. It might not be considered technically higher education, but it's more vocational and it's more focused on your field. So it can be considered more relevant. So I would look into that as well. You guys have been so great. I'm so glad that we had as many questions as we did today. Thank you. And we still have a few minutes, so I'm still looking through comments and chat just to see what else there is. I like what Jennifer says. She says, an interview is a two-way street. you're interviewing the employer as well, from the handling of the application process to the interview and offer. Absolutely true. I think, there's this inclination these days that employers, they don't notify you after an interview if they've decided to go with another candidate. They just don't notify you, that they ghost you. Maybe they call you and want to have a phone interview without asking, hey, is now a good time, without scheduling it. Those are all indications of how they do business. So yes, Jennifer, you're absolutely right. From the application process, if you go online and they have this messy online application system that takes you 3 hours to do and it doesn't work properly, it's an indication of how they do business. So yes, you are interviewing them. Look at it all and make sure you're comfortable with how they do business. Ooh, good. We got another question. Karen says, currently an administrative assistant, but interested in the field of HR. Will taking a number of workshops or courses on HR topics be helpful if applying for HR positions? Credit courses is not an option financially at this time. Anything that you can do with education, I think it's always useful. It's better than nothing. When it comes to human resources, they have some very specific certifications. SHRM, S-H-R-M, Society of Human Resource Managers, I think. SHRM is their big association, and they have several levels of certification. Most human resource positions are looking for either SHRM certification or higher level education in human resources, but entry-level positions sometimes are not looking for that. And if you can talk about some other courses that you've done either online, or maybe you've attended a seminar on some HR topics, those things are always helpful. It just adds to your application. And then anything that you can talk about from your current work as an administrative professional that is human resource related. If you had any engagement with employees, if you helped to manage inquiries regarding benefits or compensation or anything like that, you can note that as well. So your on-the-job experience counts as well. Okay. You guys are so good with asking questions today. You're going to keep me right up to the hour. That's good. Okay, this question says, what techniques do you suggest for EAs to control their emotions when the orders from their managers are not reasonable? Oh, good one. Controlling emotions is generally, it's the topic of, emotional intelligence. You've got to know what you're experiencing, what you're feeling, and use that awareness of what you're feeling to, positively channel your interactions. So when you have unreasonable requests from a manager, getting emotional about it is not going to help the situation. You've got to, logically recognize that. So instead of getting emotional, you've got to work with the manager to create a new expectation. If something is unrealistic, you need to define why that's unrealistic and what a more realistic expectation would look like. So open up that conversation. If it's a deadline that would be impossible to meet, let them know, here are all the other things that are on my plate right now. Does it make sense for me to sideline all of these things so I can meet this expectation that you've set over here? Or would it make more sense for us to adjust this expectation? You're giving some options, but it's not an emotional thing. At the end of the day, your manager might not even know that it's an unrealistic expectation. So give them the benefit of the doubt that maybe they just don't understand. And you need to give them some information so they can have a more realistic expectation, or a more realistic, what did you ask? A reasonable order that they're giving you. So hope that's helpful. Oh, good. Sigrid had a good comment here. He says, for a time, I thought I would be interested in pursuing HR. Back to the last question that we had. So I volunteered at BC HRMA events. It was a good way to sit in on some free workshops in exchange for a bit of volunteerism. Check with your local HR Professionals Association. Fantastic. Yes, volunteering for association events is a wonderful way. I mean, it's also very cost effective because you're volunteering, maybe you're checking in attendees for a session, but you also get to sit and gain knowledge from that. And by volunteering, you're showing some leadership characteristics, and you have some experience there to talk about in your resume too. All right, such good stuff today. Thank you all. You made this session by asking all these fantastic questions. I want to thank you so much for choosing to be here for the live session. It just makes all the difference in the world knowing that you're here and you're engaging with me through the chat menu. So thank you for being here. And I hope to see you in our next session. I'll give you a quick programming note. So next month is June, and I am going to be on vacation. I'm going to Disney World, everybody. So my boyfriend and I are taking his 2 teenage daughters to Disney World for a week. So I will not be doing live events next month. I apologize in advance for that. I will be sending out a big notification, so there should be no confusion. But we will pick up with our regular programming, doing the live Q&A session as well as the live webinar in July. We do have one more webinar, though, that is scheduled later this month, in the month of May. We are talking about stress management, such a useful topic for absolutely every single professional in the world. So I hope that you can attend that session. It'll be in about 2 more weeks. So thank you so much, everyone. I see that there's some more conversation. And if you have other questions, I'm sorry if I didn't get to it today. Please go and submit it through the Q&A form. I will make sure that I get back to you. I know since we don't have next month's session, I'd be happy to just answer your question through email so you don't have to wait 2 months to get a response. All right, everyone. Thanks again and see you soon. Bye.